The morning Caribbean sun glints off the barrel of a massive 18-pounder cannon as it rolled into position on the gun deck of a pirate vessel. Across the choppy waters, a Spanish treasure galleon sits heavy in the water, her holds full of silver from the New World mines. The pirate crew moves with practiced efficiencies, some loading the great guns with chain shot designed to tear through rigging, others checking the priming on their flintlock pistols, while still others test the keen edges of their cutlasses against calloused thumbs. In moments, this peaceful morning will erupt into thunderous violence as these two worlds collide. But what will determine the outcome of this encounter? Will it be the devastating power of the pirates' cannons, capable of splintering oak planks and sending deadly splinters flying like arrows? Perhaps the rapid fire of muskets and pistols in the hands of desperate men fighting for their freedom and fortune. Or maybe it will come down to cold steel, cutlass against cutlass, boarding axe against rapier, in the brutal hand-to-hand combat that decides the fate of ships and souls on the high seas. The truth is, pirate warfare was never about any single weapon, but rather about the deadly combination of firepower, fear, and ferocity that these maritime outlaws wielded like no other fighting force of their era. Unlike the rigid tactics of royal navies or the defensive strategies of merchant vessels, pirates developed a unique approach to combat that maximized psychological impact while minimizing their own losses. They understood that their greatest weapon wasn't necessarily the biggest cannon or the sharpest blade, but the terror their very presence struck into the hearts of their enemies. This wasn't warfare as gentlemen understood it, with rules of engagement and codes of honor. This was survival, combat practiced by men who had nothing to lose and everything to gain, who fought not for king and country, but for their share of whatever treasure they could tear from the grasp of a world that had already abandoned them. Their weapons were tools of a trade that demanded both devastating firepower and intimate violence. The ability to cripple a ship from hundreds of yards away and then fight face to face in the confined spaces of a captured vessel. Today, we're going to explore the arsenal that made the golden age of piracy possible, from the massive ship-killing cannons that could decide battles before they truly began, to the personal weapons that turned ordinary sailors into some of the most feared warriors on the seven seas. We'll discover how pirates acquired, maintained, and employed these instruments of maritime warfare, and how their innovative tactics revolutionized naval combat throughout the Caribbean, the American coast, and beyond. But this isn't just a story about steel and gunpowder. It's about how desperate men created new ways of fighting that challenged the established order and changed the nature of war at sea forever. The weapons in pirate hands weren't just tools of conquest, they were instruments of rebellion, symbols of freedom, and the means by which outcasts and rebels carved out their own violent corner of the world. The foundation of pirate naval power rested on their ship-mounted artillery, the great cannons that could reach across the waves to smash enemy vessels into submission or cripple them for capture. But pirate gunnery was fundamentally different from that practiced by legitimate navies, reflecting both the practical limitations these outlaw crews faced and their unique tactical objectives. Royal Navy ships fought to destroy enemy vessels in service of national strategy, seeking decisive victories that would eliminate threats to their nation's maritime interests. Merchant vessels, when forced to fight, aimed to drive off attackers and preserve their valuable cargoes. Pirates, however, had entirely different goals that shaped every aspect of how they employed their artillery. They wanted to capture ships intact, along with their precious cargoes, while minimizing damage to the very prizes they sought to claim. This fundamental difference in objectives created a distinctive pirate approach to naval gunnery that emphasized precision over raw destructive power, intimidation over annihilation, and speed over sustained bombardment. Pirates became masters of what we might call surgical naval warfare, using their cannons not as bludgeons but as scalpels, cutting away their enemy's ability to fight or flee, while leaving the valuable prize largely intact. The cannons that armed pirate vessels came in a bewildering variety of sizes and types, each serving specific tactical purposes in the complex choreography of pirate naval combat. The backbone of most pirate batteries consisted of medium-weight guns, typically 6, 8, or 12-pounders, that provided the perfect balance between hitting power and practicality for crews that often operated with limited manpower and resources. These medium guns were versatile weapons that could fire different types of ammunition depending on the tactical situation. Loaded with solid shot-dense, iron or stone balls, they could punch holes through enemy hulls or dismount opposing cannons. But pirates more commonly employed specialized ammunition designed to cripple rather than sink their targets. Chain shot, consisting of 2 iron balls connected by a length of chain, was perhaps the most characteristic ammunition of pirate gunnery. When fired, the chain would extend as the balls spun through the air, creating a whirling instrument of destruction, perfectly designed to tear through the complex rigging that controlled an enemy ship as sails. A few well-placed chain-shot rounds could leave even a large warship helpless, its sails hanging in tatters and its ability to maneuver completely compromised. Bar shot served a similar purpose, consisting of 2 iron balls connected by an iron bar rather than chain. This ammunition was particularly effective against masts, capable of snapping even massive timbers if it struck at the right angle. Pirates who could bring down an enemy's mainmast with a lucky shot often found their opponents surrendering immediately, knowing that their ship was now defenseless and unmaneuverable. For close-range work against enemy personnel, pirates employed grape-shot clusters of small iron balls that spread out after leaving the cannon barrel, turning the gun into a massive shotgun capable of sweeping enemy decks clear of defenders. Grape-shot was particularly devastating during boarding actions, when pirates would fire point-blank into masses of enemy sailors trying to repel their assault. The larger guns in pirate arsenals, 18 and 24-pounders, were typically mounted on the most successful ships and served primarily as psychological weapons. The thunderous roar of these massive cannons and the spectacular destruction they could inflict often convinced enemy captains to surrender without a fight, saving both sides the casualties and damage that would result from actual combat. But pirates also employed smaller weapons that filled crucial tactical niches in their naval warfare system. Swivel guns, light cannons mounted on pivoting bases, could be quickly aimed at specific targets and loaded with grape shot to sweep enemy decks or small shot to cut rigging. These versatile weapons were particularly valuable during the final stages of an attack, when precise fire could eliminate specific threats or clear the way for boarding parties. The carronade, a short-barreled cannon that fired heavy shot at relatively low velocities, became increasingly popular among pirates during the later years of the Golden Age. These weapons were particularly effective at close range, capable of smashing through enemy hulls while requiring smaller powder charges and lighter construction than traditional long guns. Pirates appreciated carronades for their destructive power and their relatively simple operation, which made them ideal for crews that might not include professionally trained gunners. The tactical employment of these various weapons required considerable skill and experience, qualities that successful pirate gunners developed through years of combat and practice. Unlike naval gunners, who could rely on standardized training and professional instruction. Pirate artillerymen learned their craft through trial and error, developing techniques that were often unorthodox but undeniably effective. The most successful pirate gunners understood that their role extended far beyond simply loading and firing cannons. They were tactical specialists who had to assess each combat situation and select the appropriate weapons and ammunition for maximum effect. Against a heavily armed warship, they might begin with long-range fire, using solid shot to test the enemy's resolve and inflict some damage, before closing for more decisive action. Against a lightly defended merchant vessel, a few rounds of chain shot might be sufficient to convince the crew to surrender without further resistance. The loading and firing of ship's cannons in the Age of Sail was a complex and dangerous process that required coordinated teamwork from specially trained gun crews. Each cannon required a team of 4 to 8 men, depending on its size, working in carefully orchestrated sequence to clean, load, aim, and fire their weapon, while managing the tremendous forces and deadly hazards involved in the process. The gun crew's work began with swabbing out the barrel with a wet sponge to extinguish any remaining sparks from the previous shot, a crucial safety measure that prevented premature ignition of the new powder charge. The proper charge of gunpowder was then measured and rammed home, followed by a wad of cloth or paper to hold the powder in place, then the cannonball or specialized shot, and finally, another wad to prevent the projectile from rolling out when the ship pitched or rolled. Once loaded, the massive gun had to be run out through its porter process that required several men hauling on tackle systems that could weigh up to 2 tons when dealing with the largest cannons. The gun was then aimed using crowbars and handspikes to adjust its elevation and bearing, while the gun captain selected the right moment to fire based on the ship's motion and the target's position. The actual firing was accomplished by touching a glowing, slow match or spark from a flintlock mechanism to a small charge of fine powder in the gun's touch hole. The resulting explosion would hurl the projectile toward its target, while sending the cannon careening backward against restraining tackle with tremendous force or recoil that could crush unwary crew members and had to be carefully managed to prevent damage to the ship itself. This entire process, from swabbing to firing, could take several minutes, even with an experienced crew working at maximum efficiency. Pirates, operating with smaller crews than naval vessels, often developed shortcuts and innovations that increased their rate of fire while maintaining effectiveness. Some pirate gunners became famous for their ability to keep up sustained fire that matched or exceeded that of professional naval crews, despite having fewer men. The psychological aspect of pirate gunnery was just as important as its physical effects. Pirates understood that the sound and spectacle of cannon fire could be as valuable as the actual damage inflicted, and they often employed their artillery as much for intimidation as for destruction. The sight of black powder smoke wreathing a pirate ship, accompanied by the thunderous roar of multiple cannons firing in sequence, was often enough to convince merchant crews that resistance was futile. Many pirates became skilled at creating maximum visual and auditory impact with their gunnery, timing their salvos for maximum psychological effect and using techniques like firing all guns simultaneously to create impressive but wasteful displays of firepower. The goal was to appear so formidable that enemies would surrender without fighting, preserving both the pirates' strength and the value of their prizes. The transition from long-range artillery combat to close-quarters fighting marked one of the most critical phases of any pirate attack. Once their cannons had crippled an enemy vessel or convinced its crew to surrender, Pirates faced the dangerous task of actually boarding and capturing their prize, a process that required an entirely different set of weapons and tactics. The boarding of an enemy ship was perhaps the most dangerous moment in any pirate's career. It required men to leap across open water or swing on ropes between vessels, then fight their way through determined defenders in the confined spaces of the enemy ship. Success depended on speed, surprise, and the effectiveness of personal weapons in close-quarters combat. The cutlass, that broad, slightly curved sword that has become the iconic symbol of pirate warfare, was perfectly designed for this type of fighting. Unlike the longer, thinner swords favored by gentlemen duelists or military officers, the cutlass prioritized practical effectiveness over elegance or tradition. Its short, heavy blade could deliver devastating cuts without becoming entangled in rigging or caught on ship fittings, while its substantial weight gave it tremendous chopping power that could cleave through rope, wood, or bone with equal effectiveness. The cutlass evolved from earlier naval weapons like the falchion and was originally issued to merchant sailors as a tool for cutting rope and clearing obstacles as much as a weapon for fighting. Pirates adopted and refined the design, creating blades that were optimized for the specific demands of shipboard combat. The typical pirate cutlass had a blade between 24 and 30 inches long, with a straight or slightly curved profile and a substantial handguard to protect the wielder's fingers during the violent exchanges of close combat. The weight and balance of a cutlass made it an ideal weapon for sailors who lacked formal training in swordplay. Unlike rapiers or small swords that required years of practice to master, a cutlass could be wielded effectively by anyone with sufficient strength and courage. Its design emphasized powerful chopping attacks rather than the complex thrusts and parries of formal fencing, making it perfect for the desperate, no-holds-barred fighting that characterized pirate boarding actions. Pirates often customized their cutlasses to suit their individual preferences and fighting styles. Some preferred longer blades for greater reach, while others favored shorter, lighter weapons for speed and maneuverability. Many pirates had their blades decorated with engravings or inscriptions, both as expressions of personal pride and as psychological warfare against enemies who might glimpse these fearsome weapons during combat. The effectiveness of the cutlass in pirate hands was enhanced by the way these weapons were typically employed. Pirates rarely engaged in formal duels with their opponents, instead using their cutlasses as part of a coordinated assault that might include multiple attackers against single defenders. The cutlass was perfectly suited to this type of group fighting, allowing pirates to deliver powerful attacks while maintaining the mobility needed to support their comrades or respond to changing tactical situations. But pirates didn't rely solely on edged weapons for their personal armament. The flintlock pistol was equally important to pirate warfare, providing the shock effect of firearms combined with the portability and quick deployment that shipboard combat demanded. Unlike the longer muskets used by military forces, pistols could be drawn and fired quickly in the cramped conditions aboard ship, making them ideal for the surprise attacks and rapid movements that characterized pirate tactics. The typical pirate pistol was a single-shot weapon using the flintlock mechanism that had revolutionized firearms during the late 17th and early 18th centuries. When the trigger was pulled, a flint struck a steel plate, creating sparks that ignited a small charge of gunpowder in the pan, which in turn set off the main charge in the barrel and fired the ball. This system was more reliable than earlier matchlock mechanisms and could be fired in wet weather, making it particularly suitable for maritime use. Pirates often carried multiple pistols to overcome the limitation of single-shot weapons, tucking several guns into their belts or specially designed holsters that allowed quick access during combat. The famous pirate Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard, was said to carry 6 pistols into battle, giving him multiple shots before having to resort to his cutlass or other weapons. The psychological impact of pistol fire was often as important as its physical effects. The flash, smoke, and thunderous report of multiple pistols firing in the confined space of a ship's deck created a terrifying cacophony that could break the morale of defending crews. Pirates learned to coordinate their pistol fire for maximum intimidation, often firing volleys that would leave their opponents stunned and demoralized before the real fighting began. But pistols were not just weapons of intimidation, they were deadly instruments that could kill or disable enemies at ranges where cutlasses were ineffective. A well-aimed pistol shot could eliminate a key defender or officer, potentially causing the collapse of organized resistance. Pirates became skilled at using their pistols tactically, identifying and neutralizing the most dangerous opponents before closing to finish the fight with cold steel. The loading and maintenance of flintlock pistols required considerable knowledge and skill, as these weapons were delicate instruments that could malfunction if not properly cared for. Pirates had to understand the proper mixture of gunpowder, the right size and weight of bores for their weapons, and the techniques needed to keep flintlock mechanisms functioning in the corrosive maritime environment. Many pirates became expert marksmen with their pistols, developing the accuracy and speed needed to make every shot count in combat situations where there might not be time to reload. This skill was developed through constant practice and real combat experience, creating a cadre of firearms experts who could use their pistols with devastating effectiveness. In the chaotic conditions of shipboard fighting, the musket, while less commonly associated with pirates than the cutlass and pistol, played an important role in many pirate operations, particularly during extended sieges or land-based activities. These longer firearms provided greater accuracy and power than pistols, making them valuable for picking off enemy officers or defenders at longer ranges. Pirate muskets were typically military weapons captured from enemy ships or purchased from corrupt suppliers, who sold arms to anyone with sufficient money. These weapons varied widely in quality and design, reflecting the international nature of pirate armaments and their opportunistic approach to acquiring equipment. The loading process for muskets was similar to that for pistols, but took considerably longer due to the weapon's size and the need to use a ramrod to seat the charge and ball properly. This made muskets less suitable for the rapid-fire tactics that pirates preferred. But their greater power and accuracy made them valuable for specific tactical situations. Some pirates specialized in musket work, developing the marksmanship skills needed to provide covering fire for boarding parties or to eliminate specific threats during combat. These marksmen often positioned themselves in the rigging or other elevated positions where they could observe the battle and engage targets of opportunity with their long arms. Beyond these primary weapons, pirates employed a variety of specialized arms and improvised weapons that reflected their creative and opportunistic approach to combat. Boarding axes were popular weapons that combined the utility of tools with the effectiveness of weapons, allowing pirates to cut through obstacles or enemy rigging while providing a formidable weapon for close combat. The boarding axe was typically shorter and lighter than traditional woodcutting axes, with a sharp blade on one side and often a spike or hammer on the other. This versatile weapon could chop through rope or thin wood, break down doors or barriers, and deliver devastating attacks against enemy personnel. Many pirates preferred boarding axes to cutlasses for fighting in extremely close quarters, where the axe's compact design and multiple attack options provided significant advantages. Daggers and long knives served as backup weapons and tools, providing pirates with options when their primary weapons were lost or damaged during combat. These smaller blades were often carried in addition to larger weapons, tucked into boots or belts where they could be quickly accessed when needed. Some pirates favored specialized weapons that reflected their personal preferences or cultural backgrounds. Spanish pirates might carry traditional weapons from their homeland, while those from other regions brought their own martial traditions to the pirate community. This diversity of weapons and fighting styles made pirate crews formidable opponents who could adapt to various combat situations. The improvised weapons that pirates created from ship's equipment demonstrated their resourcefulness and creativity in combat situations. Belaying pins, wooden clubs used to secure rigging, became effective bludgeons in desperate situations. Boat hooks could serve as spears or pikes for repelling boarders. Even carpenters' tools like hammers and chisels could become deadly weapons in skilled hands. The maintenance and care of personal weapons was a crucial responsibility for every pirate, as their lives literally depended on keeping their arms in fighting condition. The maritime environment was particularly harsh on metal weapons, with salt, spray, and humidity causing rapid corrosion if proper care wasn't taken. Pirates developed various techniques for protecting their weapons from the elements, including regular cleaning and oiling, wrapping in oiled cloth, and storing in dry compartments when not in use. Many pirates became skilled armorer, learning to repair and modify their weapons as needed to maintain their effectiveness. The acquisition of weapons was an ongoing challenge for pirate crews, who had to obtain and maintain their armaments without access to legitimate suppliers or military stores. Most pirate weapons were captured from their enemies, taken from ships, ports, or settlements that they raided. This meant that pirate arsenals were often eclectic collections of weapons from various sources, requiring crews to master different types of arms and ammunition. Successful pirate crews developed networks of suppliers who would sell them weapons and ammunition, often operating in the grey areas of colonial commerce where corruption and informal trading flourished. These suppliers might be legitimate merchants who weren't particular about their customers, corrupt officials who diverted military supplies, or specialized arms dealers who catered to the outlaw community. The black market in weapons was particularly active in pirate havens like Port Royal, Nassau, and Tortuga, where pirates could openly purchase arms and ammunition without fear of legal consequences. These markets provided pirates with access to the latest weapons technology and allowed them to standardize their armaments around proven designs and calibers. Some pirate crews included skilled craftsmen who could manufacture or modify weapons to suit their specific needs. Blacksmiths could repair damaged firearms or create custom cutlasses, while other specialists might work with gunpowder or create specialized ammunition for particular tactical situations. The economics of pirate armament represented a significant investment that had to be carefully managed by successful crews. Quality weapons were expensive, and the ongoing costs of ammunition, maintenance, and replacement could consume a substantial portion of a crew's resources. Pirates had to balance the need for effective armament against other essential expenses like food, ship maintenance, and crew shares. This economic reality meant that pirates placed great value on capturing enemy weapons and ammunition, often treating arms and military supplies as treasure equal in value to gold or silver. A ship loaded with muskets, gunpowder, and cannonballs could be as valuable to pirates as one carrying precious metals, providing them with the tools they needed to continue their operations. The tactical integration of different weapon systems was one of the keys to pirates' success in combat. Effective pirate crews learned to coordinate their various weapons, cannons, small arms, and personal weapons in ways that maximized their combat effectiveness while minimizing their own casualties. A typical pirate attack might begin with long-range cannon fire designed to damage the enemy's rigging and demoralize their crew. As the distance closed, swivel guns and musket fire would sweep the enemy decks, eliminating defenders and clearing the way for boarding. Finally, pistols and cutlasses would finish the job as pirates swarmed aboard the captured vessel. This progression from long-range to close-range combat required careful timing and coordination, with different weapon systems taking the lead at different phases of the battle. Pirates who could smoothly transition from one phase to another often achieved victory with minimal losses, while those who failed to coordinate their various weapons might find themselves bogged down in costly fighting. The psychological warfare aspect of pirate armament was as important as its physical capabilities. Pirates understood that their reputation for ruthlessness and their fearsome appearance could often achieve victory without fighting. The sight of a heavily armed pirate crew, bristling with cutlasses and pistols and backed by a ship mounting numerous cannons, was often enough to convince merchant crews that resistance was futile. Many pirates cultivated intimidating appearances that enhanced the psychological impact of their weapons. Blackbeard was famous for weaving slow-burning matches into his beard, creating a demonic appearance wreathed in smoke that terrified his enemies. Other pirates adopted distinctive clothing, weapons, or personal adornments that enhanced their fearsome reputations. The sounds of pirate weapons also contributed to their psychological impact. The thunderous roar of cannon fire, the sharp crack of musket volleys, and the clash of steel on steel created an acoustic signature that announced the presence of pirates and struck fear into the hearts of their enemies. Pirates learned to orchestrate these sounds for maximum intimidation, creating cacophonous displays of firepower that often convinced enemies to surrender before serious fighting began. The international nature of piracy meant that pirate weapons reflected global trends in military technology and manufacturing. Pirates might carry English cutlasses, Spanish pistols, French muskets, and Dutch gunpowder, creating arsenals that represented the best military technology available from around the world. This international character of pirate armament also meant that pirates were often among the first to adopt new weapons technologies, as they were not constrained by military bureaucracies or traditional procurement processes. A pirate who captured a ship carrying the latest military innovations could immediately integrate these new weapons into his crew's arsenal, potentially gaining significant tactical advantages over more conservative opponents. The evolution of pirate weapons during the Golden Age reflected broader changes in military technology and tactics. Early pirates of the mid-17th century relied heavily on edged weapons and relatively simple firearms, but by the early 18th century, pirate arsenals included sophisticated artillery, advanced small arms, and specialized ammunition that rivaled the equipment of major naval powers. This technological evolution was driven partly by the arms race between pirates and their opponents, as colonial governments and naval forces developed new weapons and tactics to combat piracy, forcing pirates to adapt and innovate in response. The result was a period of rapid military innovation that benefited from the practical experience of men who used their weapons in life-and-death situations on a regular basis. The decline of the Golden Age of piracy was influenced partly by technological changes that favored larger, more organized forces over the small, flexible crews that had dominated pirate warfare. Improved naval artillery, better training for legitimate crews, and more effective ship designs gradually eroded the tactical advantages that had made pirates so successful during their heyday. But the weapons and tactics developed by pirates during this period had lasting influence on naval warfare and maritime technology. Many innovations in ship design, gunnery techniques, and small unit tactics that were pioneered by pirates were eventually adopted by legitimate naval forces, contributing to the evolution of modern naval warfare. The legacy of pirate weapons extends far beyond their historical period to influence popular culture and our modern understanding of maritime warfare. The Cutlass, flintlock pistol, and ship's cannon have become iconic symbols of the age of sail, representing both the romance and the reality of life on the high seas during this tumultuous period. The study of pirate weapons also provides valuable insights into the relationship between technology, tactics, and social organization. Pirates demonstrated how relatively small groups of motivated individuals could challenge established powers through innovative use of available technology, creating new forms of warfare that maximized their strengths while exploiting their enemies' weaknesses. The weapons that armed pirate ships represented more than just tools of war. They were symbols of rebellion, instruments of survival, and the means by which outcasts and rebels carved out their own violent corner of the world. From the thunderous cannons that could cripple enemy ships at long range to the keen cutlasses that settled matters in brutal hand-to-hand combat, these weapons reflected the unique challenges and opportunities of the pirate life. The effectiveness of pirate armament lay not in any single weapon system, but in the integrated approach that these maritime outlaws developed to maximize their combat capabilities while minimizing their vulnerabilities. They understood that successful piracy required the ability to project power across the full spectrum of naval combat, from long-range artillery duels to intimate boarding actions where cold steel decided the fate of ships and men. The men who wielded these weapons were not professional soldiers trained in formal military academies, but desperate individuals who learned their deadly skills through hard experience and constant practice. They developed techniques and tactics that were often crude by military standards, but undeniably effective in achieving their objectives of capturing ships and cargoes while preserving their own lives and freedom. The diversity of weapons found in pirate arsenals reflected both the international nature of their community and their opportunistic approach to acquiring equipment. Pirates used whatever worked, regardless of its origin or original purpose, creating eclectic collections of arms that might include the finest military weapons alongside improvised tools and captured equipment of questionable quality. This practical approach to armament was typical of the pirate mentality that valued results over form, effectiveness over tradition, and survival over honor. Pirates could not afford the luxury of standardized equipment or formal military procedures. They had to make do with whatever they could capture, steal, or purchase, then figure out how to use it effectively in the unique conditions of maritime combat. The maintenance and care of weapons in the harsh maritime environment required constant attention and considerable skill. Pirates who failed to properly maintain their arms often found themselves defenseless at critical moments, while those who mastered the arts of cleaning, repair, and modification could keep their weapons functioning effectively. Despite the corrosive effects of saltwater humidity and constant use, the acquisition of weapons and ammunition was an ongoing challenge that shaped every aspect of pirate operations. The need to capture or purchase arms influenced their choice of targets, their selection of bases, and their relationships with suppliers and authorities. A successful pirate crew had to be as skilled at logistics and supply management as they were at combat and seamanship. The economics of pirate armament also influenced the internal dynamics of pirate crews, as weapons represented valuable assets that had to be fairly distributed according to each crew's articles and traditions. The allocation of the best weapons, the sharing of captured arms, and the responsibility for maintaining the crew's arsenal were all matters that required careful management to preserve crew unity and effectiveness. The psychological impact of pirate weapons was often as important as their physical capabilities. The mere sight of a well-armed pirate crew was frequently enough to convince merchant sailors that resistance was futile. Achieving the pirates' objectives without the costs and risks associated with actual combat, this psychological dimension of pirate warfare required careful attention to appearance, reputation, and the theatrical aspects of maritime intimidation. The coordination between different weapon systems was crucial to pirate success, requiring crews to master complex tactics that integrated artillery, small arms, and personal weapons in fluid sequences that adapted to changing combat conditions. This tactical sophistication belied the popular image of pirates as undisciplined rabble, revealing them instead as skilled practitioners of a unique form of warfare. The international character of pirate weapons reflected the global nature of the colonial economy and the worldwide networks of trade and conflict that shaped the Age of Sail. Pirates operated at the intersection of these global systems, acquiring weapons from multiple sources and using them in conflicts that spanned oceans and continents. The technological innovation fostered by pirate warfare contributed to broader advances in military technology and tactics. The practical experience gained by men who used their weapons in frequent combat led to improvements and modifications that often spread throughout the maritime community, influencing the development of naval warfare far beyond the pirate community itself. Looking back at the arsenal of pirate weapons, we can see how these tools of war reflected both the desperation and the ingenuity of men who lived outside the law but developed their own forms of organization and effectiveness. Their weapons were not just instruments of violence but symbols of their rebellion against a world that offered them few alternatives to a life of crime and constant danger. The cutlass in a pirate's hand was more than just a sword. It was a declaration of independence from the social order that had failed to provide legitimate opportunities for advancement and prosperity. The pistol tucked into his belt was not just a firearm, but a guarantee that his voice would be heard and his interests protected in a world that would otherwise ignore or exploit him. The cannons that armed pirate ships were not just artillery pieces, but the means by which small groups of determined men could challenge the commercial and military powers that dominated their world. These weapons gave pirates the ability to project force across vast distances and to threaten the maritime commerce that sustained colonial empires and merchant fortunes. In the end, the true power of pirate weapons lay not in their individual capabilities, but in the way they were integrated into a unique system of warfare that challenged conventional military thinking and achieved remarkable success against seemingly overwhelming odds. The pirates who wielded these weapons understood that their survival depended not on superior equipment, but on superior tactics, coordination, and the willingness to take risks that their more conventional opponents would never consider. The legacy of pirate weapons reminds us that technological innovation often emerges from the margins of society, where necessity drives creativity and where conventional solutions are inadequate to meet unique challenges. The men who turned cutlasses, pistols, and cannons into the instruments of their own violent form of democracy created new ways of fighting that influenced military development for generations to come. The art of cannon placement aboard pirate vessels was a science unto itself, requiring careful consideration of weight distribution, firing angles, and the structural integrity of ships that were often captured vessels never designed for heavy armament. Pirates had to become master engineers, calculating how many guns their ships could carry without compromising speed or seaworthiness, while positioning them for maximum tactical effectiveness. The gun ports themselves were often crude modifications cut into captured merchant vessels that had never been intended for warfare. Pirates would reinforce these openings with whatever materials they could find, creating makeshift but functional firing positions that allowed them to mount impressive batteries on ships that had never been designed as warships. This improvised approach to naval architecture often resulted in vessels that looked fearsome but required constant maintenance to prevent structural failure. The process of running out the guns for battle was a carefully choreographed dance that required every member of the gun crew to know their role precisely. The massive weight of 18 and 24-pound cannons meant that moving them required coordinated effort from multiple men using block and tackle systems that multiplied their strength. A single mistake during this process could result in a runaway gun that would crush anyone in its path and potentially punch through the ship's side. Pirates developed unique techniques for managing their artillery that differed significantly from naval practices. Without the benefit of professional military training, they had to learn through experience and innovation, creating methods that were often unorthodox but remarkably effective. Some pirate crews became famous for their ability to maintain rapid fire despite having smaller crews than naval vessels, achieving this through simplified loading procedures and creative crew organization. The selection of powder charges was a critical skill that separated effective gunners from mere cannon fodder. Too little powder would result in shots that fell short or lacked penetrating power, while too much could damage the gun or even cause it to explode. Pirates had to become experts at judging the right charge for different situations, considering factors like range, wind conditions, and the type of shot being fired. The timing of artillery fire was equally crucial, as ships rolling in heavy seas presented constantly changing firing solutions. Pirates learned to fire on the upward roll of their ship to achieve maximum range, or on the downward roll to increase the chances of hulling an enemy vessel. This required split-second timing and an intuitive understanding of their ship's motion that could only be developed through extensive experience. The smoke generated by black powder cannons created its own tactical challenges and opportunities. The dense white smoke that erupted from each gun could quickly obscure vision across the battlefield, making it difficult to assess damage or coordinate further attacks. Pirates learned to use this smoke as concealment, sometimes creating false impressions of damage or position to confuse their enemies. The maintenance of cannons in the corrosive maritime environment required constant attention and specialized knowledge. Salt spray and humidity caused rapid deterioration of iron guns, while the repeated shock of firing could loosen fittings and damage carriages. Pirates had to become skilled metallurgists and carpenters, learning to repair and maintain their artillery with limited resources and improvised materials. The casting and modification of cannonballs was another area where pirates demonstrated remarkable ingenuity. Standard iron shot was expensive and not always available, forcing pirates to create their own ammunition from whatever materials they could find. Some crews became skilled at casting their own balls, using scrap, iron, and improvised molds, while others modified existing shot to create specialized ammunition for particular tactical situations. The coordination between different gun crews during battle required sophisticated communication. systems that could function despite the noise and confusion of combat. Pirates developed various methods for coordinating their fire, from flag signals to drum beats to shouted commands that could be heard over the thunderous roar of artillery. The most effective crews could deliver devastating broadsides that struck enemy vessels with multiple shots simultaneously. The psychological impact of different types of artillery fire was well understood by experienced pirate gunners. The distinctive whistle of chain shot as it spun through the air created terror among enemy crews who knew the devastating effect it could have on rigging. The sharp crack of grape shot spreading out after leaving the gun barrel warned defending sailors that death was approaching in the form of dozens of small projectiles. The economics of artillery warfare placed significant constraints on pirate operations. As gunpowder was expensive and not always available when needed, pirates had to carefully manage their ammunition supplies, balancing the need for impressive displays of firepower against the practical requirement to conserve resources for future engagements. Some crews became experts at achieving maximum psychological impact with minimum expenditure of ammunition. The development of specialized gun crews within pirate organizations reflected their understanding that artillery expertise was crucial to their success. The best gunners were valued members of any crew, often receiving extra shares of prize money in recognition of their critical skills. These specialists became the backbone of pirate naval power, their expertise often making the difference between successful capture and costly failure. The training of new gunners was an ongoing challenge for pirate crews, as the skills required for effective artillery service could not be learned quickly or easily. Experienced gunners had to serve as teachers and mentors, passing on their knowledge to younger crew members while maintaining the high standards of performance that successful piracy demanded. This informal education system created a cadre of skilled artillerymen who could match or exceed the capabilities of professional naval crews. The adaptation of captured artillery to suit pirate needs often required significant modification and creative problem-solving. Guns designed for naval service might need to be remounted on different carriages, while captured field artillery might require naval carriages to be useful aboard ship. Pirates became skilled at these modifications, creating hybrid weapons that combined the best features of different designs. The tactical flexibility required for effective pirate gunnery meant that crews had to master a wide variety of techniques and procedures. Unlike naval gunners who might specialize in particular types of combat, pirate artillerymen had to be prepared for any situation, from long-range duels with warships to point-blank exchanges during boarding actions. This versatility was one of the keys to pirate success in naval combat. Moving beyond the realm of ship-mounted artillery, the personal firearms that armed individual pirates represented a revolution in portable warfare technology. The flintlock mechanism that powered these weapons had transformed combat by providing reliable ignition that could function in the wet conditions common at sea, making firearms practical for maritime use in ways that earlier matchlock weapons never could be. The variety of pistols available to pirates reflected the international nature of their trade and the diverse sources from which they acquired their weapons. English pistols were prized for their reliability and craftsmanship, featuring high-quality locks and carefully bored barrels that provided excellent accuracy. French weapons often incorporated elegant design elements that combined functionality with aesthetic appeal, while Spanish pistols reflected the martial traditions of a nation with extensive experience in colonial warfare. The barrel length of pirate pistols was typically shorter than military weapons, reflecting the close-quarters nature of shipboard combat where long barrels would be unwieldy and potentially dangerous to the user. These shorter barrels reduced accuracy at longer ranges, but provided the quick handling characteristics that pirates needed for the rapid, fluid combat situations they frequently encountered. The caliber of pirate pistols varied widely, from small-bore weapons that fired balls of 40-inch diameter to massive ship's pistols that fired 75 caliber projectiles capable of stopping a man at considerable range. Pirates had to balance the stopping power of larger calibers against the increased weight and reduced ammunition capacity that came with bigger weapons. The loading procedure for flintlock pistols was complex and time-consuming, requiring the user to measure powder, seat the ball properly, and prime the pan with fine powder while managing multiple components in potentially dangerous conditions. Pirates developed streamlined loading techniques that reduced the time required while maintaining reliability, often pre-preparing cartridges that combined powder and ball in paper packages that could be quickly loaded when needed. The multiple pistol-carrying systems developed by pirates were marvels of practical design that allowed them to bring significant firepower to bear in rapid succession. Shoulder holsters, belt systems, and specialized slings were all employed to carry the 3 to 6 pistols that many pirates considered essential for effective combat. The famous image of Blackbeard, with 6 pistols distributed across his body, represented not just intimidation, but practical firepower that could dominate a boarding action. The accuracy achievable with pirate pistols was limited by the smoothbore barrels and primitive sights of the era. But skilled marksmen could achieve impressive results at the close ranges where most pirate combat took place. Pirates practiced extensively with their weapons, developing the instinctive shooting skills needed to engage targets quickly and effectively in the chaotic conditions of shipboard fighting. The maintenance of flintlock mechanisms required detailed knowledge of the complex interactions between springs, screws, and moving parts that made these weapons function. Pirates had to become amateur gunsmiths, learning to repair and adjust their weapons using basic tools and improvised materials. The reliability of their firearms often depended on their ability to maintain these delicate mechanisms in the harsh maritime environment. The gunpowder used in pirate pistols had to meet specific requirements for grain size, moisture content, and chemical composition that affected both performance and safety. Pirates learned to test their powder regularly, recognizing the signs of deterioration that could lead to misfires or dangerous accidents. The storage of gunpowder aboard ship presented constant challenges, as the explosive material had to be kept dry while remaining accessible when needed. The psychological impact of pistol fire was amplified by the dramatic, visual, and auditory effects these weapons produced. The bright flash of ignition, the dense cloud of white smoke, and the sharp report created an impressive display that could intimidate enemies and boost the morale of pirate crews. Pirates learned to choreograph their pistol fire for maximum psychological effect, often coordinating volleys that created overwhelming displays of firepower. The integration of pistol fire with other weapon systems required careful timing and tactical coordination. Pirates had to learn when to employ their limited pistol shots for maximum effect, whether to eliminate specific threats, provide covering fire for boarding parties, or simply create the chaos and confusion that could break enemy resistance. The effective use of pistols often determined the success or failure of boarding actions. The social significance of pistols within pirate communities extended beyond their military utility to encompass questions of status, wealth, and personal identity. Fine pistols were treasured possessions that reflected their owner's success and standing within the crew. while the ability to use these weapons effectively was a mark of competence and courage that earned respect from fellow pirates. The customization and personalization of pistols became an important form of self-expression among pirates who had few other opportunities to display their individuality. Engraving, inlays, and decorative elements were added to weapons when resources allowed, creating unique pieces that reflected their owner's personality and achievements. These customized weapons often became legendary within pirate communities, associated with famous exploits and notable victories. The tactical employment of muskets by pirate forces required different skills and techniques than pistol work. As these longer weapons were primarily used for precision shooting at extended ranges rather than close-quarters combat, pirates who specialized in musket work often served as designated marksmen, providing covering fire and eliminating specific targets that could threaten their crew's operations. The accuracy potential of muskets was significantly greater than that of pistols. Thanks to their longer barrels and more stable firing positions, skilled pirate marksmen could engage targets at ranges of 100 yards or more, picking off enemy officers or key defenders who might otherwise coordinate effective resistance. This capability gave pirate forces a tactical advantage that could prove decisive in many engagements. The loading time required for muskets made them less suitable for the rapid-fire tactics that pirates typically employed, but their greater range and power made them valuable for specific situations. Pirates learned to coordinate musket fire with their other weapons, using these longer-range weapons to begin engagements while closing to pistol and cutlass range for the decisive phase of combat. The bayonet attachments available for many muskets provided pirates with effective polearms that could be valuable in the confined spaces of ship decks. These blade attachments transformed muskets into spears that could be used to repel boarders or clear enemy decks, providing pirates with versatile weapons that combined firearms and edged weapon capabilities. The specialized ammunition available for muskets included not only standard lead balls but also buckshot loads that turned these weapons into large-caliber shotguns, effective against multiple targets. Pirates experimented with various projectiles, including improvised loads that used nails, broken glass, or other materials to create devastating anti-personnel effects. The maintenance requirements for muskets were similar to those for pistols but complicated by the weapons' greater size and more complex barrel systems. Pirates had to learn to clean and maintain these longer weapons using specialized tools like ramrods and cleaning patches. While managing the greater quantities of gunpowder and shot these weapons required, the training required to become proficient with muskets was more extensive than that needed for pistols, as these weapons required steady shooting positions and careful aim to achieve their full potential. Pirates who mastered musket shooting often became valuable specialists whose skills could influence the outcome of major engagements. Transitioning from firearms to edged weapons, the cutlass represented perhaps the most iconic and effective tool in the pirate arsenal. The evolution of this weapon from earlier naval swords reflected the specific needs of maritime combat, where traditional military weapons proved inadequate for the unique challenges of fighting aboard ships. The blade geometry of pirate cutlasses was carefully optimized for cutting effectiveness, with a slight curve that concentrated force at the point of impact while maintaining the structural strength needed to withstand repeated blows against hard targets. The width and thickness of these blades provided the mass needed for powerful attacks while maintaining sufficient flexibility to avoid breaking under stress. The edge geometry of cutlass blades required specialized knowledge to maintain properly, as the angle and sharpness of the cutting edge directly affected the weapon's performance. Pirates learned to sharpen and maintain their blades using whetstones and other tools, developing the skills needed to keep their weapons in fighting condition despite the harsh conditions of maritime life. The handle design of pirate cutlasses reflected the need for secure grip even when hands were wet, bloody, or numbed by cold. The guards and grip wrapping used on these weapons were specifically chosen to provide maximum control during the violent exchanges of hand-to-hand combat, while the balance point was carefully considered to optimize the weapon's handling characteristics. The forging and construction of cutlass blades required skilled metalworking that was often beyond the capabilities of pirates themselves, making these weapons valuable prizes that were carefully maintained and passed down within pirate communities. The quality of steel used in cutlass construction varied widely, from cheap iron that would barely hold an edge to high-carbon steel that could maintain razor sharpness through extended combat. The fighting techniques developed for cutlass combat were necessarily different from those used with longer, lighter swords designed for formal dueling. Pirates developed slashing attacks that maximized the weapon's cutting power while minimizing the time spent in vulnerable positions, creating a brutal but effective fighting style that could quickly disable opponents. The integration of cutlass work with other weapons created fighting systems that allowed pirates to transition seamlessly from firearms to edged weapons as combat distances changed. The ability to fire a pistol and then immediately draw and employ a cutlass was a crucial skill that required extensive practice and coordination. The psychological impact of cutlass combat was intense and immediate, as the sight of sharp steel and the sound of blade meeting blade created visceral fear that could break enemy morale. Pirates learned to use their cutlasses not just as weapons but as instruments of intimidation that could achieve victory without extended fighting. The variety of blade lengths and weights available in pirate cutlasses allowed individual fighters to select weapons that matched their physical capabilities and fighting preferences. Larger, stronger pirates might favor heavy blades that could deliver devastating attacks, while smaller, quicker fighters might prefer lighter weapons that allowed rapid movement and agile defense. The tactical applications of cutlasses extended beyond personal combat to include utility functions that made these weapons valuable tools aboard ship. Pirates used their cutlasses to cut rigging, clear obstacles, and perform various tasks that required sharp, heavy blades, making them essential equipment rather than specialized weapons. The training required to become effective with a cutlass was less formal than traditional swordplay, but no less demanding, as pirates had to develop the strength, timing, and tactical judgment needed for successful blade combat. This training was typically conducted through sparring with blunted weapons and informal instruction from experienced fighters. The social significance of cutlasses within pirate communities was substantial, as these weapons often served as symbols of a pirate's status and reputation. A well-made cutlass was a valuable possession that might be passed down through generations, or traded for other essential supplies when circumstances required. The boarding axe represented another crucial category of pirate weapon that combined practical utility with combat effectiveness. These specialized tools were designed specifically for the unique challenges of ship-to-ship combat, where the ability to quickly breach barriers and overcome obstacles could determine the success or failure of boarding operations. The head design of boarding axes incorporated both cutting edges for chopping through wood and rope, and piercing points for punching through barriers or attacking armored opponents. This dual functionality made these weapons incredibly versatile tools that could adapt to changing tactical situations during the fluid combat that characterized pirate boarding actions. The handle length of boarding axes was carefully balanced between the leverage needed for powerful chopping attacks and the maneuverability required for combat in confined spaces. Pirates had to be able to swing these weapons effectively in the cramped conditions between decks while maintaining enough power to cut through substantial obstacles. The weight distribution of boarding axes was critical to their effectiveness, as improper balance could make these weapons unwieldy and dangerous to their users. The best boarding axes achieved a balance that allowed for quick, controlled strikes that could be delivered accurately even in the chaotic conditions of shipboard combat. The metallurgy of boarding axe heads required high-quality steel that could hold a sharp edge while withstanding the repeated impacts of chopping through wood, rope, and bone. Pirates had to understand the properties of different steels and learn to maintain their axes properly to ensure they remained effective when needed. The tactical employment of boarding axes required different techniques than those used for cutlasses or other edged weapons. Pirates had to learn to use the momentum of their weapons effectively, delivering powerful chopping attacks that could overwhelm enemy defenses while maintaining the speed and agility needed for effective combat movement. The versatility of boarding axes made them valuable tools for many tasks beyond combat, including ship maintenance, cargo handling, and emergency repairs. This multi-purpose capability made boarding axes essential equipment that every pirate crew needed, regardless of their specific tactical preferences or operational requirements. The intimidation factor of boarding axes was considerable, as these weapons appeared both primitive and threatening in ways that could demoralize opponents before combat began. The sight of pirates armed with these brutal-looking tools often convinced enemy crews that resistance would be both futile and extremely costly. The training required for effective boarding axe use was different from that needed for other weapons, as these tools required understanding of leverage, timing, and target selection that was unique to their design and application. Pirates had to develop the specific skills needed to employ these weapons effectively in the situations where they would be most valuable. The manufacturing and maintenance of boarding axes often fell to the ship's carpenter or other skilled craftsmen who could work with wood and metal. Pirates had to understand the construction of these tools well enough to perform basic maintenance and repairs, as damaged weapons could fail at critical moments during combat. Beyond individual weapons, pirates employed various forms of artillery and specialized equipment that enhanced their combat capabilities. Swivel guns represented a crucial category of light artillery that provided rapid-fire capability against personnel targets while remaining manageable by small crews. The mounting systems for swivel guns had to provide stable firing platforms while allowing rapid traverse to engage targets across wide arcs of fire. Pirates developed various mounting solutions that could be quickly installed on captured vessels or improvised from available materials when standard mountings were not available. The ammunition for swivel guns included both solid shot for use against structural targets and various forms of scatter shot for anti-personnel work. Pirates became skilled at selecting the appropriate ammunition for specific tactical situations, maximizing the effectiveness of these versatile weapons. The crew requirements for swivel guns were minimal compared to larger artillery, making these weapons ideal for pirate operations where manpower was always at a premium. A single gunner could operate a swivel gun effectively, though additional crew members could increase the rate of fire and provide assistance with ammunition handling. The tactical flexibility of swivel guns made them valuable for many different situations, from providing covering fire during boarding operations to defending against counterattacks by enemy crews. Pirates learned to position and employ these weapons to maximum advantage, creating overlapping fields of fire that could dominate entire sections of enemy vessels. The psychological impact of swivel gun fire was amplified by the weapon's distinctive sound and the visible destruction they could inflict on personnel targets. The sharp crack of these guns and the obvious effects of their scattershot created immediate terror among enemy crews who witnessed their devastating capabilities. Hand grenades and other explosive devices represented another category of pirate weaponry that provided area effect capabilities not available with individual weapons. These improvised explosives were typically created using whatever materials were available, from glass bottles filled with gunpowder to more sophisticated devices constructed by skilled craftsmen. The construction of effective hand grenades required understanding of explosive principles and timing mechanisms that was often beyond the capabilities of ordinary pirates. Those crews that included members with appropriate knowledge could create devastating weapons that provided significant tactical advantages in close-quarters combat. The employment of explosive devices required careful coordination and timing to avoid injuring friendly forces while maximizing damage to enemies. Pirates had to develop techniques for using these weapons safely and effectively, often through dangerous trial-and-error processes that cost lives and equipment. The psychological impact of explosive weapons was enormous, as the sudden blast and destruction created panic that could break enemy resistance even when the actual casualties were limited. Pirates learned to use the shock effect of explosives to maximum advantage, often achieving victory through intimidation rather than actual destruction. The materials for creating explosive devices had to be carefully managed and stored, as the components were both valuable and dangerous. Pirates had to balance the combat advantages these weapons provided against the risks and costs associated with their construction and use. So the next time you see the romantic image of a pirate with cutlass in hand and pistol at his side, remember that these weapons were not just props in an adventure story, but practical tools wielded by desperate men who used them to challenge the established order and carve out their own violent corner of freedom on the high seas. Their arsenal was a reflection of their world, brutal, practical, and effective in the hands of those who had mastered both the weapons themselves and the unique form of warfare that made piracy, however, briefly, one of the most successful challenges to established authority in the maritime world of the 18th century.